Hey everyone, I'm here with Bill Bedell. And Bill, if you don't know Bill, he is a counselor by trade. And so he has um, lots to share with us about this season that we're going through. First of all, thanks for coming by this morning. We had a little socially distant conversation in the driveway, and it was just good to see your face, man. I'm
Yeah.
a little tired of Zoom sometimes.
Yeah, me too. I miss my friend. So sometimes, seeing somebody over the phone just isn't that great. It's good, but gosh, we're just made to be with each other, and it's far better just sitting down with you over coffee and whatever you drink, the Earl Grey tea or whatever, English
Not
breakfast.
real great.
Oh yeah, English breakfast. Um,
So you had some different thoughts. Like, I mean, this is kind of an overwhelming time for most of us.
yeah.
Like it's just generating so much in terms of anxiety and uncertainty, and yet you see it a little differently, and I was curious about that because it didn't feel like you were being overly optimistic or trying to paint it in a less severe light, but you just had some different thoughts on what we could take away from it. So maybe just dive in and share a little bit about what you've been thinking there.
Yeah, I'm not typically one that likes to throw a false fake hope over things like a Jesus blanket without really embracing what's going on. And I don't like squeezing lemons into lemonade. Like that doesn't really, to me, encapsulate the hope of the gospel. Um, so what I've started to notice with the space that we have is just a different amount of time and space and awareness that can come out of that I think God's working through in a different way in everybody's life for sure. Um, One of the things that came up is just being in such tight proximity with your family. Normally, we are running from baseball practice to work, to trying to get time with my wife, to making sure the kids get what they need, to making sure that I have space for myself. And in a lot of ways, I'm not having to make those choices in the same way. So it creates this different space in some ways just to be aware of what is there. These are, I think, more simple rhythms. But
Yeah, I hear that, and I also go. I feel like how do you allow it to be that though? Because it feels a lot of times it feels so unsettling that the
mm,
rhythm isn't there, and there's so much that gets stirred up by it. Like how do you flip it and see it as opportunity
mm.
instead of just chaos?
Yeah, and I think it's not just a perspective shift, like, because I think you can do that, try and shift it mentally. I think, a lot of times change happens in disruption, right? And it's not always comfortable, but sometimes the uncomfortable isn't necessarily bad, it's just different. And, the way that God designed the body and families and interconnectedness with other people is fairly intuitive. And so there's this reality of just sometimes when things are uncomfortable, it's because they're true, or maybe it's been easier to not deal with certain things or ignore things because we don't have the time and space. So that doesn't mean that the thing that's coming up is necessarily bad, right? It could be just that, it's different, it's foreign, it's uncomfortable. But I think that's where God works a lot in terms of how kind he is and the way that he invites us to change. Is that sometimes if we're not a bit uncomfortable, then we're not going to see growth or change, because there's nothing pushing us or
Right.
challenging us to look at things differently. I think just being aware of something kind of precedes change. Like
Yeah.
a lot of times, we get real intentional about change, like I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, you know, and
Yeah.
that's fine. Like sometimes life is about that, just making the simple changes. Other times it's just having the space that we have, like right now, we become aware of things. And I think sometimes sanctification and change is about what God wants to do with us. It's not so much about us trying harder.
Mm.
So I think the space is, you know, as uncomfortable as it is, I think that God is, I see God using that in a lot of people's lives to invite them into things that normally they wouldn't look at, or maybe not have the time to look at. It's not even intentional, right? We're just kind of flying around in our lives doing what we're doing.
Yeah, you said
So
something this morning about not not so much about being intentional
yeah, whatever.
as it is paying attention.
Yeah, like I think we have certain ideas about what we should be doing, and that's okay. Like we're just people, right? So that can change and fluctuate, you know, by the hour, minute, by the day. But God has uh, an intention for us, right? That his thing is going to get worked out in us, and sometimes just leaving space to be open to that, of course, is uncomfortable because it's a little more out of our control. And it would make sense with COVID-19 and the loss of control and kind of how we react to things. Like it makes sense to want to do that. But I think there's maybe a gentler invitation into something as God's bringing up things. He's doing that for our best, right? Like maybe this space, unlike any other time that we've seen, you know, can help make us aware of Him more. Maybe some of the rhythms spiritually that we maybe haven't had room for or didn't know how to do, or even things like, you know, being creative or getting back into some of those things that you used to do that kind of gone by the wayside. So I think it challenges us to kind of look at, you know, maybe in a more hopeful way, a more upbeat way of like, like what is being afforded here? Like, what are the opportunities that I have? And not just to make a positive spin on it. It's like, I'm sad, but that's not all I am.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't dismiss the depth of those losses ever.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, it embraces it. And I think the more that we're willing to embrace joy or embrace what we're feeling, you know, then we're allowed to kind of feel the gamut of emotions,
Sure.
and we're not just stuck in one. And like I think about obedience from the Old Testament is just about listening, right? And so to be able to listen to what's going on and pay attention and begin to trust that a little more, rather than just processing really hard about how to survive and, you know, how to stay alive, right? Like we're far more dynamic than that. So it's important not to forget that we have that resource. Some of these things about the space that we have feel very, uh, I don't know, maybe freeing in that sense, is that if you can see and listen and pay attention to what's going on in your family, like, man, there's so much that can change, you know, so.
And that's a really good setup too for just a plug for this weekend. Kevin Steigers is going to be bringing the message this weekend.
Kevin.
And Kevin has seen his life put on pause more than once, and so there's a lot that we can learn from him about this experience. And so be sure to tune in or log on this weekend to hear what he has to say, because that's going to be good. So thanks, Bill. And
yeah, man.
We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
All
I'll go
right.
wait in the driveway.
All right. It's good to see you, man.
We'll see you later. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
My wife would love that. I do this all the time in the car and it makes her mad.